well? Perfect. Okay, so thanks, Liz. Yeah, so exhausted to empowered. This is really about when I was doing my trauma sensitive yoga certification to become a facilitator. A lot of what I learned about was really helping us to slow down and take time for ourselves. And I'm really passionate about helping people who are helping people, which is probably most of you, especially people who are in direct service type of industries. You tend to be the people that care a lot, and when you care a lot, sometimes you give a lot, and you give a lot, and you give a lot, and you forget to receive. So this is really about how to create this culture of taking care of yourself so that you're able to continue to power your mission. Perfect. So that's about me. I like to dance in my kitchen, bike to Pilates, go for walks, get up with the sunrise, all that good stuff. So what you can expect from today is we're going to talk about recognizing the signs and symptoms of compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, and burnout. I'm sure everyone's heard of burnout. Has everyone heard of compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma? Okay. So we're going to go a little bit into those things. And I will say, like, the slides are very text heavy, but you have access to it in the Mova app. But the reason why some of them are so text heavy is because there's just a lot of information. And the one in the app is like the formatting is kind of funky because I created this on Canva and then not everything. So if you feel like you want that one and you want it to look better, just send me an email. I'm happy to send it to you in a different format. And then understanding the importance of creating a trauma-sensitive workplace. And then if we have time, my goal is that I will offer a facilitation of trauma-sensitive yoga, whether it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes at the end, so you can kind of experience what it might be like to explore some of the tools that I'm going to share with you today. All right. So, many of you saw in the app, I did ask this question. So there's going to be some opportunity for discussion or self-reflection if we don't feel like discussing, but throughout the presentation. So right now, just asking yourself, like, what brings you to the work that you're doing? Is it that you have a big passion for the work that you're doing? Is it that you just needed a job and this looked cool? Like, think about, like, what is bringing you to the work that you're doing right now? Maybe you're volunteering, you know, it doesn't matter if you're getting paid or not, or what position you have. It's what's really bringing you there, and just doing a little bit of self-reflection. And you're welcome to journal on this if you want, or write it down, or just kind of self-reflect in your head. And then also asking, what does self-care mean to you? Because self-care can mean different things to everyone, and sometimes, depending on the version of self-care that you hear, sometimes it can feel good, and sometimes it can feel like kind of icky or just weird, or like I'm not doing it right, and there can be shame behind that too. So just kind of reflecting on that for yourself, and then what informs your thoughts and values about self-care. So does anyone want to share answers to these questions, or like how you feel about self-care? Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So I'm a nurse. I started my career in the ED during COVID, and I experienced burnout really fast. We were working in very tough conditions, and I found myself really isolated because I was one of the few people that was working in the work. I was working with high-stress patients, and it was a lot. And finding self-care for me was finding the people that I could still be around and not have to feel guilty about being on COVID. So I started backpacking. With friends, and really helping me with stress and finding that self-care for myself.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So she mentioned that she found rock climbing and a community, and that's a big thing that you bring up that we're going to talk about is self-care and collective self-care. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's the difference between trauma-informed and trauma-sensitive. And when I started facilitating trauma-sensitive yoga, this was the most common question, and it's still the most common question I get is like, what's the difference between trauma-informed and trauma-sensitive? And I didn't know how to answer it at first, so I went to my mentor, and they said that really the big difference is a lot of times with trauma-informed, it's like this checkbox that we have of like, okay, we need to be trauma-informed. So we took this training, and now we can say we're trauma-informed, but it tends to be more of this like cognitive knowledge and less of a way of being. And trauma-sensitive is really about embodying being trauma-informed and taking that into your life in all different areas of your life and really embodying that and seeing the world from maybe a little bit different perspective. I was in the session with the women from House Hope or Hope House. And they were talking about their organization being trauma-informed, and they were really embodying that of like, they had processes in place and discussions that they had with people. It wasn't just like one thing that they did so they could say that they were doing it. Because, and why this matters is people within your organization, people that you're working with, board members, whoever that might be, we want them to have a sense of safety in what they're doing. And if we're just checking the box, if we just say like, we love all people here, but then we're not implementing how we love all people here, or that we have a sign that says something, but that our actions mean something different, then it really doesn't do anything for the people that you're wanting it to do that for them. Does that make sense a little bit? So we're really trying to embody this as a practice of how do we do this on an everyday basis. And it comes with practice and practicing these things. So, so why this matters. So I give the definition of oppression. So oppression plays a leading role in creating and maintaining systems that perpetuate trauma. And this is from Laura Vandernoot-Lipsky. Are you familiar with her? Yeah, she has a great book called Trauma Stewardship, and it's about taking care of yourself while you're taking care of others. So she has a really great book. I actually have another quote from her later. But so it plays a leading role in maintaining systems that perpetuate trauma. And oppression, according to Merriam-Webster, is the unjust and cruel exercise of authority or power. So if there are any leaders in here, and you have, again, like, for instance, you have this sign that says something, but then your actions aren't saying that, you're inherently oppressing people, whether it's people that you work with or people that you're serving. And you may be doing it without even realizing it. And that's the thing here, is like, if you're wanting to be trauma-informed, it means that you're coming from a good place, but are we implementing those things, and how can we do that in a different way? And the second definition is a sense of being weighed down in body or mind. And we don't want to be doing that to people, right? We want to be helping to uplift them and empower them, and uplift and empower each of you so you can continue to do the work that you're doing. And feel free, if you have questions throughout, to throw up a hand. So empowerment, the process of gaining freedom and power to do what you want or to control what happens to you. And so that's really important, is that we're empowering people to feel that sense of control and power. Within trauma, trauma is a loss of sense of power. Something happened to us and we didn't have control over it. And we don't want to be imparting that on other people. So we want to focus on the empowerment piece. So trauma-sensitive culture. Self-care says, I need to take care of myself. And collective self-care says, we need to take care of each other. We need to take care of everyone. Sometimes if you hear those two things, it kind of feels like, if I'm taking care of myself over here as self-care, then I can't be taking care of people over here, right? It feels like it's an opposite. And so what trauma-sensitive culture is both, is I need to look after me, and we need to look after each other. That if I'm looking after myself, that doesn't mean it's taking away from the people that I'm also looking after. Especially if you have organizations where you have staff and volunteers and all that kind of stuff, it's seeing it as both. That it's not either or, that it's and. And you can see in like the stickers that I have for you, like this and symbol is a really prominent piece of like my life. In doing grief, trauma, and every part of my life, this has really been a cornerstone for me. So I have this in my office and I bring it almost to every speaking engagement that I do and workshop that I do. It's that reminder to embrace that and, that it's not this either or, that we can have both. And that someone taking care of themselves does not have to take away from the group taking care of each other. So take care of your needs during this presentation. And this is an opportunity to practice having created a trauma-sensitive culture. So if you need to get up and go to the bathroom because we just had lunch and you forgot to go before here, or you're just getting tired, you know, and you need to stand up, that's okay. And that you don't have to feel like if I stand up, I'm interrupting. That it's okay for you to take care of yourself and know that you're not taking away from the presentation that's happening. You're not taking away from someone else's experience here. Because so often in meetings, right, and in situations like this, we neglect ourselves. We say, I have to go to the bathroom, but I guess I can wait, right? And maybe, if there's 5 minutes left, maybe you can wait, but if it's only halfway through, you start neglecting yourself. And we'll talk about this in a little bit, but when you start neglecting yourself over and over again, that starts becoming the norm. It starts becoming who you are, and you start neglecting other parts of your own needs instead of saying, okay, I need to take care of myself. And if we're doing that over and over again, that's where the compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, and burnout come in. So make sure you're taking care of yourself. You need to get up to get a drink of water. And the other piece of that too is like, if someone has to get up or someone comes in late, that we're also not judging the people that are doing that, because that can happen too. Right? Because it's like, oh, why is that person getting up? They're being so rude. I know I used to think that all the time when I was in meetings or presentations. I'd be like, why is that person getting up? They're interrupting. That's because that's what we were taught in school too, right? It's like you can't get up unless you're allowed to. And so kind of breaking down some of that, and that you can do that within your organization as well. So this is like definitely like the text heavy portion, but I wanted you to have the information about these topics. So compassion fatigue is fatigue that comes it's caused by dealing with other people's trauma and suffering. And most of you said you were kind of familiar with this. So have any of you guys done like trainings on compassion fatigue? Yeah, okay, awesome. And it's really common in any type of profession that focuses on helping others. So does anyone here help others? Do you guys help others? Okay. So that's why this is so important, right? And then it's also focusing too much on others' well-being and unable to, especially other people that aren't able to manage their own stress. And reminding yourself that it's not up to you to help someone else manage their stress. Right? That you don't have to take that on all the time, that it's not up to you, and that you have to be able to manage your own stress, so that maybe if you do need to help someone, especially depending on what you're doing. I worked in the special needs area for a long time with children too, right? And so it's like, sometimes they need help because they just don't even, they didn't understand what was going on. But if I'm doing that constantly and not taking care of myself, then eventually I'm not able to take care and help that person. So this is where boundaries can really play a big role. And boundaries in the way that you're not completely shut off or detached, but boundaries where it's like you can have that compassion, but then you have a space to go after to alleviate some of that stress that can be put on you. So signs that you may be experiencing compassion fatigue, I do have a slide after I talk about each of these that kind of sums it up for you. But so some of them, constant headaches, so physical symptoms can happen. Sometimes people don't realize how much mental things can affect our physical health. And so constant headaches, avoidance, detachment is a big one. And then even like lack of intimacy is on there. And so relationship problems with people that we're living with, people, our family, our friends. It's not just about you at work. It's about you in your everyday life. Because how many of us have ever gone into work and you kind of like put on this like, I'm a professional now, or you kind of like put on this mask, and you say, okay, I'm a professional, I can do this, and then when you get home, it's just like, take that off, and just like, you end up unloading on everyone at home. I know I do that sometimes. I know, especially if any of you have kids, my daughter does that like several times a week when she comes home from school, right? Because at school they're taught, you have to sit down and be quiet. But if you have any neurodiversity or anything like that, that's really challenging. So when she gets home, I get the brunt of being yelled at and being called stupid and all these types of things. But it's like, I know that that's because she's taking off that mask. And so oftentimes, it's important that we take care of ourselves so that we're not doing that to our loved ones. Because, she's a child, she doesn't, totally get it yet. So we don't want to be putting that on our family and friends. And then burnout. So burnout is when you have a professional responsibility to ensure that your clients are safe. At the same time, you have a personal responsibility to look after your own mental health. So this comes back to the and, right? It's both. And burnout occurs easily when these two aspects get out of balance, when we focus only on one or the other. And usually it tends to be focusing on your professional responsibility. And so making sure that we're not forgetting about your personal well-being as well. So some symptoms: deep exhaustion, lack of motivation, withdrawal, so similar to compassion fatigue with detachment, cynicism, fatigue, so fatigue, again, another physical sign, and then vicarious trauma. There's several slides about vicarious trauma because it is very similar to trauma, obviously. But so vicarious trauma is an occupational challenge for people working or volunteering in victim services, law enforcement, emergency medical. So it's also, again, a reminder to not forget about your volunteers, too. That volunteers need this as much as anyone else, especially if they're in direct contact with folks. And it's due to continuous exposure to victims of trauma and violence. And so these are some opportunities of where this might happen. So listening to individuals recount their victimization, watching things happen. I work with case managers a lot, so like reviewing case files and not taking a break from doing that. So those are some ways that it can occur. And then also some factors that may put you at a higher risk, or may put people at a higher risk, is prior traumatic experiences. I don't know about you, but the more I learn about trauma, the more I realize pretty much everyone has experienced some traumatic experiences in their life, especially during the pandemic. Lots of traumatic experiences happening on a collective level, social isolation, and then that constant and intense exposure to trauma with little or no variation of work tasks. So if you're doing things like case files or whatever you're doing, even if we're in a session about social media, what if you're like creating social media posts to create awareness and advocacy and reading all these stats over and over again and you're not taking a break from that? So it's just like being aware of making sure you're taking breaks. And then some of the effects that I highlighted these last few: loss of sense of meaning of life. Like, what's the point of this? I feel like I'm not, like, what's the point of what I'm doing? Feeling hopeless about the future. And then the relationship problems. That's a big one. I feel like that's the one that really people don't realize at first, that it's really the relationships. And oftentimes, again, it's the relationships of the people that are in your life outside of work that it's really affecting you. And so we don't want that. And then a couple others that I highlighted: the lack or decreased participation in activities that used to be enjoyable. So if you're like, oh, I used to love painting, or I used to love going for walks, or I used to love hanging out with this group of friends, and now I'm like isolating myself, or doing these things, that can be a signal. And avoiding work interactions with clients. So this is the kind of the overall compassion fatigue, burnout, and vicarious trauma. Some of the more common ones. Have any of you heard of the protocol at all? This little bit on the bottom. Has anyone taken that at all? So there is, on the last page of the slideshow, there's all the resources listed there. And so the protocol was developed to measure both negative and positive effects of working with those that have experienced traumatic stress. So it can help you have indications for compassion satisfaction, burnout, compassion fatigue, and it's been proven to be a valid measure of compassion satisfaction and fatigue. So there's a link at the end of the presentation. It's a tool that some people use, especially people in law enforcement and things like that, but anyone can really use that as a way to check in with yourself, a way to check in with the people that on your staff, to say like, okay, where are we at with this? And how can we support you if you need that support? That's a really beneficial tool. Any questions so far? So it was like a lot of like heavy, like academic type of stuff. But any questions or, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, the last two for vicarious trauma, like symptoms of vicarious is like you're like around people or talking about or interacting with like trauma from other people, and then that causes like burnout. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, it causes similar symptoms as trauma does. So vicarious trauma is like it can be like witnessing a trauma, which could either be a trauma in and of itself, or it could be considered a vicarious trauma, or it's like hearing stories over and over again, watching videos over and over again of traumatic experiences. What was that? Sure, here, let me get you in mind. There you go.
So at the end of my career in the ER, I work in urgent care now. What stopped me from wanting to be an ER nurse is I had a patient that was 6 weeks old, being involved in STEM, and I saw their dad pass out and scream. And after that, I went home and I loved, and I couldn't handle it anymore. So I experienced his trauma through him losing his child. So I feel like that'd be good.
Yeah, right. Like you're watching someone experiencing a trauma, essentially. But it doesn't have to be that, like, it doesn't have to be direct either. You don't have to actually be in that situation. It can be from listening and watching. And there's so many videos out there nowadays, right? So many videos that you can see on YouTube, especially when you think about like police brutality and things like that. All the videos are out there, and it's like, it's being aware of it for yourself too. And because depending on what the work that you're doing, sometimes you need to be in that space, right? It's not about avoiding it completely, but it's like being aware of it and making sure that it's not taking over everything, and that you're taking care of yourself so that it doesn't become something where you have to leave. Because like that's my goal, is that you can continue to do the work that you're passionate about. That you get to continue to do that, and you don't have to leave it because your health is it can't handle it anymore. Thank you for asking. Any other questions or clarifications? So complex trauma. The reason I bring up complex trauma is, trauma sensitive yoga, it's TCTSY, is much easier to say, is an empirically validated and studied form of, what am I trying to say? A modality to help with complex trauma and PTSD. And it's an adjunctive treatment to talk therapy and any other types of therapy for complex trauma and PTSD. And so although most of the people I'm working with have maybe experienced that, most of the people I work with are experiencing more of compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, or burnout, or they're trying to prevent that from happening, but there are some overlaps. So that's why I share, because this modality is really for this aspect, but it can be used in so many different ways. I actually just facilitated for an organization earlier this week, and 2 people came up to me after, and they have EDS, which is like Ehlers something syndrome. It's like with like connective tissue, that their connective tissues are more sensitive, so they can like hyperextend and hypermobilize. And they were just like, oh my gosh, I've never been able to like experience a movement practice where I didn't feel pressure to do something, and I actually felt like I could move and feel safe in my own body. And so it's like, it can be used for so many different aspects, and that's what I really get excited about utilizing it for. So, as far as complex trauma, it's something that happens between 2 or more people over a period of time. Is really the key there. And so with all with the big 3, let's say, compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, and burnout, those all involve being around other people, right? Usually it's within context of somebody else, and it happens over time, right? So even about your example it was probably something that was being built up, and then that was like the last thing that just said, I can't do this anymore. Yeah.
So would COVID, people through a period of COVID as a global pandemic, would that be considered complex trauma? Or is there something that can be even more?
No, and oftentimes complex trauma happens in childhood, but it can happen later in life. And so like childhood abuse or like domestic abuse that children are witnessing, that can be considered complex trauma. Some people think complex trauma and they think about what it looks like after and like what the symptoms are, but it's complex because of how it's happening to them and how it's happening over and over again and over a period of time. Does that help? Okay. The pandemic could be considered more of like a collective trauma, but it depends. Like if you experienced, if you had like a family member that like was hospitalized for a month, and then another family member that died, and then like all these other things that happen, it could be. So how they're all related. So this is a quote. I finally came to understand that my exposure to other people's trauma had changed me on a fundamental level. There had been an osmosis. I had absorbed and accumulated trauma to the point that it had become part of me, and my view of the world had changed. So that's that Laura Vanderlipsky again. But so her exposure to other people's trauma had changed her on a fundamental level. So that's the same thing with complex trauma. Any trauma, it can change us on a fundamental level. So that's how they relate and why it's so important to know those things. Okay, so I am going to try and play this here. It's just 2 minutes.
How many of you think you want to be more vulnerable and dare greatly? How many of you are comfortable asking for help? Yeah, right. Good. Yeah. That was awesome. Then it sucks. Yeah.
Asking for help from whom?
Right. How many of you had rather give help than ask for help? Okay, so let me just ruin this for you. When you cannot ask for help without self-judgment, you are never really offering help without judgment. So if
Stand up and tell the truth. Okay, let's hear that one again. I gotta write that down.
no,
I hear it better when I write it down.
this one was devastating for me because where are my social workers? Yes. Hello. Okay, so we're professional help givers. But how many of us are good at asking for it? Here's the bottom line. Ready? When you cannot accept and ask for help without self-judgment, then when you offer other people help, you are always doing so with judgment.
Really?
Always. Because you have attached judgment to asking for help. And so one way I got a lot of my worth for a lot of years was helping other people.
Yeah.
But I would never ask for help, which meant every time I was helping you, I was judging you. And when you extract worthiness for helping people, that's judgment. That's judgment. When you don't extract worthiness and you think, I'm just helping you because one day I'm gonna need help, that's connection. That's vulnerability. Yeah.
Oh, you teaching tonight, girl. You teaching.
So, any like reactions or like just initial thoughts about that before I share? Does anyone have anything? Because I get the slides back up. Yeah, go ahead.
So I work with almost all volunteer-driven organization, and we show that because we talk a lot about like if you don't depend on your other volunteers or the staff like to help you, you just kind of go it alone. Like you're just not, you're gonna probably support a family or two and then not do it anymore, and that doesn't help, right? It's not good for you. It's not good for the families that you're serving. But we talk about that with the families we're serving. To ask for help is a strength.
Yeah.
But I think that is a big part of where I'm like, go home.
Yeah, right, yes. Yeah, that's like that ignoring, right? So what I was talking about before about like ignoring having to go to the bathroom during a meeting. That like, that also spills over into like ignoring like, oh my gosh, I'm getting a headache. Oh yeah, I forgot to drink water today or whatever because it's like, because I forgot my water and I didn't want to ask someone to get me a water. Right? Like if we have that mentality, so it's really like a self-reflection of being okay with asking for help, especially as someone who loves to give help. And when I saw that for the first time, I was like, oh my gosh, like that's me, right? Because I love helping people, but asking for help was a different situation. Yeah, go ahead.
I feel like a lot of times in helping, or like human service and social service agencies, admitting that you need help is really pushed down. I worked as a social worker in child welfare in Florida for a while, and it was, if you need help, like, what did you do wrong?
Yeah.
And that was just the ethos, that was the culture of the work environment. So that, our supervisors would turn out.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that because I feel like that's like the big thing as to, and we'll get to in a second here, is that like, that's why I feel like it has to come from leadership. Again, like talking about oppression, it's a person with power, right? And it's like, that I'm saying, that's oppressive, right? And so it's like, we don't want to create that in our organizations. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that can be counterproductive to what your mission is for helping, like, I'm a child of domestic abuse, so if you're in that field and you're not willing to ask for help, but you're trying to tell the kids or the parents that they need to ask for help to get out, then your manager telling you, don't ask for help, you're like, well, that's what we're trying to instill in them, so, I mean, it's
Yeah.
critical.
It is, and it's interesting when leadership and like the system of the organization don't realize that. And it especially happens in social work type of organizations. So yeah, it is a challenge, and that's where like advocating for this or just being like, okay, I'm creating a change, and if I'm a leader in an organization, I want to make sure that like this is how we go about this instead of this way, and really being intentional about it. Right? Again, it's not just about like the words that you have on the wall. It's about what you're saying to people and what you're doing in your actions. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so we're going to talk about these principles and kind of like intermingle them. But so TCTSY. And again, you have the website, but if you want to learn more about it in general, traumasensitiveyoga.com is where the information comes from. And so the 5 core principles of trauma-sensitive yoga are invitational language, choice making, interoception, which is the internal felt sense, and we'll go over that in a minute, shared authentic experience, and non-coercion. So an example of being coercive without maybe realizing you are is with like the stickers and business cards I laid out. I really just wanted to lay them out on the first 3 tables because I wanted everyone to be up here. But that would have been pretty coercive of me, right? But it's like, it's this unintentional thing, right? That we may or may not be doing within our organization of being like, okay, I want everyone to be up here because I want everyone to be involved. But how do I know that someone might not be like, oh, I'm not feeling well after lunch and I just want to sit in the back in case I need to leave early, right? Like, I don't get to decide that for you. And if I am deciding that for you, I'm being coercive. And so we're trying to like eliminate some of that. And we can't always eliminate all of it, but it's like bringing this, especially today, it's really about this awareness and this like consciousness of it. Well, what am I doing? And willing to like, say like, we make mistakes, right? Like in the last session too. Whether it's on social media or in your organization, it's like, we're not gonna be perfect, but this is what we're working towards. So, a trauma-sensitive tool is choice making. So going back to oppression again, right? That if someone feeling like they don't have a choice, because in trauma you don't have a choice. And so, and it's that authority and power. So that's why leadership is so important, and why I try to talk to as many leaders as possible, because it has to be them. If it's not coming from them, it's really not going to make that big of a difference unless you have a complete like uprising of everyone in the organization, right? So choice making, the power of choice. So choice, according to Oxford, I like to use a lot of different dictionaries, is the act of selecting or making a decision when faced with two or more possibilities. So choice can create agency over oneself, and that feels empowering. And so practicing possibilities of making choice with my body in the present moment, and self-discovery. And so a lot of TCTSY is about self-discovery and coming back to yourself. One of these things in trauma is about like all of your life experiences. Each experience, each bias you have, anything that you're experiencing through life, it can either take you away from yourself or it can bring you closer to yourself. And so within organizations, it's like we want to be brought back closer to ourselves, because when we know ourselves, when we know our worth, when we feel loving towards ourselves, we're willing to ask for help. And we're willing to say, hey, I don't like this is affecting me in this way, and we want to be able to empower people in that way. And so we want more opportunities for people to come back to themselves, especially if you're working with people where it takes you away from yourself. So some of those like the traumatic experiences that you're living through other people, those experiences are most likely taking you away from yourself. So we need to create more experiences that help you come back to yourself. And that's why too with like self-care, it's like, what is self-care for you? And maybe for one person it's coloring, maybe for the next person it's going for a walk, maybe for the next person it's going out with friends. And it doesn't have to look the same always. So sometimes there are choice-making challenges. So what might be some choice-making challenges within your organization? Especially when we talk about social workers. That's where it's like a lot of times social workers burn out or leave, because it's like there's so many challenges and I don't want to fight the system by myself. With like red tape and all the bureaucracy, or like maybe it's just like the paperwork and things like that. So thinking of like what are some of the challenges in our organization where people might feel a challenge to like that they don't have a choice. What are some areas where they feel like they don't have a choice? And where do you feel a loss of sense of control over the power of your work? So kind of similarly. So these are some things to reflect on. I don't know if anyone has any like initial like, oh yeah, I feel like this, like I don't have a choice in this right now. But so you can reflect on this, yeah, go ahead.
I guess I don't have a choice with what my caseload is like, since we're very understaffed.
Yeah, so caseload, yeah, that's a big one. Yeah, that's a big challenge. So it's like you don't have a choice over that. So how can I combat the big three, compassion, fatigue, vicarious trauma, burnout, if I have this huge caseload? How am I supposed to be able to do that? Yeah, that's a big one. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else have anything on top of mind? Yeah, go ahead.
I just recently started to be part of a gym management leadership team, and so there's 4 people like co-managing, and then we have like a staff. And I just got a text message like, oh, I can't come in today, from one of the gym staff. And so like I feel like I don't have any control over that, and I'm like in a position where I can give like schedules ahead of time, and I can be flexible, and I can build in structures, kind of like Brandon in his position, but build in structures so that people don't feel like they like have to come in if something comes up. But it's like a really complex challenge that I'm like facing right now.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, like the staffing piece of it, definitely. So these are things to consider, like when you're thinking about your organization, of like where, and these are questions you could maybe ask if you are in a leadership position, of like, Where do you feel like there's a challenge, where you don't feel like there's a choice? Other challenges would be like self-doubt and your ability to choose. What's the right or wrong choice? That's a big one. And that's like, again, like embracing the and of like, okay, maybe there isn't a right or wrong, and there can be somewhere in between. Not enough information, too many choices, especially people who have experienced trauma, too many choices can be a bad thing as well. And then lack of trust. So that's like that authority figure, right? If your authority figure doesn't feel trusting to you, you're not going to voice concerns, especially if they're showing you that they're not a safe person. So trauma equals loss of control or power. So again, kind of thinking, especially if you're in a leadership position, or having, how do we give power back or shift power dynamics? So non-hierarchical choices, which is a really fun word to say, that there's no better or worse choice or no right or wrong choice. So an example might be on a virtual Zoom meeting that you're like, okay, you can, everyone put your cameras on, but if you can't, that's okay too. That's actually like a hierarchical choice. You're saying like, having your camera on is better. And if you don't, like, that's fine, but like, you're kind of saying it in this way that it's like, well, I should have my camera on even if I don't want to. And so thinking about languaging of things and offering choices. So what that might sound like instead is, you're welcome to have your camera on or off. And just like simply stating it in that way, as opposed to, sharing it in that first example. And one way that they taught us in the certification is sometimes the choices that we often think of as like the lesser of the choice, so like camera on, camera off situation, instead of saying camera off second, say it first. Because you oftentimes think of the first choice as the better choice. So in facilitation, sometimes it's like, oh, like you can be standing or sitting. So instead of saying standing first, maybe offer sitting first as an option. So sometimes you could kind of take those kind of concepts and do that in a way of like making things non-hierarchical. I really like that word. So interoception is that sense that connects us with our self, our internal sense of our heart rate, our muscle tension. I have this chart thing, I don't know how easy it is to read, but research shows that interoception has far-reaching influence on many different aspects of our life. So there's so many different aspects, from emotional regulation to cognition to body awareness to self-care. All of these different types of things are affected by our interoception. And interoception is a big piece of the neuroscience behind trauma and complex trauma and PTSD, that our brains turn off the part of our brain that feels internal, that has that internal felt sense. And so TCTSY is a practice to help you turn that back on so you feel safe, because people who have experienced trauma, if that didn't feel safe, that's a safety mechanism to turn off the internal felt sense. So your safety mechanism of, I gotta wait to go to the bathroom from this meeting, again, over and over again, that is repetitive. Doing that over and over again, your body's learning that it's okay for me to like not listen to what my body needs.
Like constant fight or flight.
Yeah, constant fight or flight, exactly, yeah. Yeah, thank you. So how might you be turning this off at work, like the bathroom example? Or what are you saying to yourself when you feel something in your body? So again, just going back to that bathroom example, what are you telling yourself? Are you saying, wow, gosh, I'm not being respectful if I get up right now. I'm not, if I turn off my camera, like what are the negative things that you're saying to yourself when you're not listening to your body? So again, these are good self-reflection questions that you could ask yourself and your staff, and just to ask and have a discussion around these things too. So back to the definition of empowerment, of gaining freedom and power to do what you want or control what happens to you. And then taking effective action essentially is, I feel something and I get to make a choice. So it's like, am I choosing what do I want to choose based on this? And I'm gonna offer a practice here, just like a 5-minute practice so you can kind of experience it. But when you are feeling something in your body and then you're offered a choice and you feel like you actually have a choice and it's not being coerced, it's not a coercive choice, that's empowerment. That's how you feel like I get to choose for me and not for the other people. Hence why I'm wearing tennis shoes. Speaking, like I don't like fancy shoes, my feet my knees get sore easily, it's like I'm wearing tennis shoes and that's okay for me because that's how I feel comfortable. Okay, so how can choice-making invitational language and perception get implemented into your workplace to create this trauma-sensitive culture? So we're talking about some of the languaging. You can shift some of your languaging and offer different things in different ways to do your best to be non-coercive, to not make choices feel like one is better or worse than the other. Okay, I love this quote from the Dalai Lama. I'm just going to read it. So in dealing with those who are undergoing great suffering, if you feel burnout setting in, if you feel demoralized and exhausted, it is best for the sake of everyone to withdraw and restore yourself. The point is to have long-term perspective. So I often talk about creating long-term sustainable success, long-term sustainable impact. We can't do that if we're burning out. We can't do that if we're not taking a step back. It's best for everyone. I found that I was like, yes, this is the best quote ever. So with that, we have a few minutes left. I'm going to offer a short practice. So you're welcome to interact with this however you would like. And if you'd like to stand, you're welcome to stand. If you're comfortable on the floor, you can do that, or you can stay in your seat. If you'd like, maybe you stay close to your table, or maybe move away from the table. But if you'd like to bring some movement into your body or explore this practice, maybe just taking a moment to notice the connection points between you and the surface beneath you. So maybe you're noticing your feet inside the shoes, or maybe you've tossed your shoes off and you're noticing them on the floor. Maybe you notice the connection points of the backs of your legs with the seat, or maybe your sit bones, which are the bones that you're sitting on. So you're welcome to notice those connection points within your body. And at any time, if you'd like to lower your gaze or close your eyes, you're welcome to do that. I will intentionally not look at people because I don't want you to feel watched or like there's a right or wrong way to do things. And so if you'd like to stand at any time, you're welcome to stand. If you want to sit, you can sit. But then if you'd like, maybe bringing some movement into your head. So this might look like tipping your head to one side. Maybe your ear is getting closer to your shoulder. You're welcome to hold that in a pause, or maybe you tip from one side to the other. Maybe you want to tip your head to the other side. So you're welcome to maybe tip your head from one side to the other. Another option might be maybe you tip your head from one side and then you lower your chin towards your collarbones and roll your head towards the other side. So maybe you're rolling your head back and forth. You can move as fast or as slow as you'd like. It might take a moment. Maybe you notice a sensation in the side of your neck or your shoulder. Maybe you notice something somewhere else. Or maybe you don't notice anything at all. If you are noticing something, you can choose whether you want to move towards that sensation or away from that sensation. Moving towards it might look like holding in a pause over that sensation, or maybe you're moving back and forth over that sensation. Or you have the choice to move away from that sensation. And then when you're ready, maybe coming back to that center point, and then maybe you want to bring some movement into your shoulders. So that might look like rolling your shoulders around. So maybe you roll your shoulders. You're welcome to another option might be to lift your shoulders towards your ears, lower your shoulders back down. Maybe you choose to do one shoulder at a time. Maybe you choose to do both at the same time. You're welcome to move as fast or as slow as you'd like. You might choose a completely different movement. Maybe you choose stillness. If you've been choosing to move one side, you're welcome to switch to the other side when you're ready. And then if you'd like, there's no rush when you're ready, maybe coming back to center, and then maybe bringing some movement into your body, into your torso. So this might look like maybe you want to tip from one side to the other. So maybe you're tipping your side from one side to the other. Whether you're sitting or standing, maybe tipping your body from one side to the other. Another option, if you're sitting down, maybe you want to scoot yourself forward. Maybe you lean forward in your chair and lean back. You can move as fast or as slow as you like. And if you'd like, you can hold in a pause somewhere. And maybe you take a moment to notice your breath. Maybe your breath is linked with the movement. So maybe you're inhaling with part of the movement and exhaling for another part of the movement. Or maybe your breath is not linked and it's moving, you're breathing independently of the movement. And then when you're ready, there's no rush, coming back to center, and maybe exploring some movement with your feet or your toes. So maybe, whether you're sitting or standing, maybe you point your toes away from you, and then arch your foot back and point your toes back towards you. Maybe you point your toes away from you, and then bring your toes back towards you. Maybe you choose to do one foot at a time, or maybe do both feet at a time. You might be exploring the sitting or standing. Maybe you notice a sensation in the back of your leg or your ankle. Maybe you notice something somewhere else, or maybe you don't notice anything at all. If you are noticing something, you're welcome to move towards that sensation by holding in a pause, or maybe you move back and forth over that sensation, or maybe you move away from that sensation. You can choose. If you've been choosing to do one side, you're welcome to maybe switch sides when you're ready, pointing your toe away from you and then flexing your foot back towards you. You might be doing both feet at the same time or one at a time. Maybe if you switch sides and you realize, I don't want to do this one anymore, you go back to the first side. There's nothing that says we need to do both sides the same amount. And then maybe you're noticing a sensation in the back of your leg, maybe in your ankle. You might notice something somewhere else in your body, maybe nowhere at all. There's no right or wrong. If you are, you're welcome to move towards that sensation by holding in a pause. Maybe move back and forth over that sensation. And then when you're ready, coming back to center, and then you can, when you're ready, you can complete your practice, knowing that there's no rush to move forward. You have about 5 minutes left, so if you want to continue your practice, you're welcome to continue your practice. I don't know where that just went. Oh, perfect. So, I guess, oh yeah, okay. So, that was a very short version. And for me, it was actually a little, like I usually don't offer something that many, like different body parts in that short amount of time. But I just wanted you to have the opportunity to kind of explore a little bit of movement. Oftentimes, people who kind of understand or have heard me speak or whatever, that understand trauma-sensitive yoga will like start a meeting with trauma-sensitive yoga and then end it. Because again, it's going back to that it's an opportunity to come back to yourself. So even today, especially people, I was talking to someone yesterday about being an introvert. She's like, oh, I'm gonna be so exhausted after the day. So even just being here today can potentially bring you away from yourself. It doesn't have to always be these a negative traumatic experience that brings you away from yourself. yourself. It can just be an experience. And so it's nice with meetings, with whatever, where you have an opportunity as the meeting is starting to come back towards yourself, and then at the end to come back towards yourself before you move on to the next part of your day. And so just a few questions to explore for yourself. What is one thing? I like to end a lot of things with this, especially because we're kind of coming to the end of this whole 2 days, is think about this as what is one thing I want to start doing, what is one thing I want to stop doing, and what is one thing I want to keep doing. Instead of trying to do it all, I have like so much information from everyone, which is super exciting, and then it's also like, how do I implement all of this? So if you can focus on one thing, whether it's one thing from this session or one thing from all of the sessions, what's one thing I want to start doing, one thing I want to stop doing, and one thing I want to keep doing. And that's oftentimes when we can simplify that, it helps us to actually make progress and do something different moving forward instead of just getting stuck in all of the information. So you're welcome to connect with me. That's my entry, honestly. And so if there's an opportunity to schedule a 15-minute call if you just want to chat about anything, and just different things, but I just wanted to offer that opportunity. And then you obviously have cards and water bottle stickers. Here's what they look like in the wild. So, but yeah, thank you all for being a part of this presentation. And if we have more questions or you want to chat a little bit more, we're welcome to do that. So thank you all for being part of this.